Thank you for having me, everyone. My name is Deborah Paulson, and I'm currently 19 years old. I am from the Western Cape, but I'm not from Cape Town. I'm currently studying theatre and performance, a diploma in theatre and performance at the University of Cape Town, and I'm majoring in acting. And I watched the Theresa Solomon interview. Thank you. I'd like to pass on to Lydian.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Lydian Plaikes. I watched the Trevor Manuel interview, and I'm currently studying a bachelor's in theatre and performance at ECT, and I'm specializing in choreography along with Lusanda. I'm very excited to be here.
Lovely. Thank you so much to our panelists. So I think I will kickstart the discussion off with our first question, which is the time during Trevor and Theresa's youth leadership, considering the situation in the country and what motivated them to take part in mobilization of the masses. Could you please share each of your understandings on what do you think contributed to their mobilization and what motivated them to really get the masses of youth together? Let's start with Lusanda.
Thanks so much, Noel. So after watching the Trevor Manuel interview, I found that he was very influenced in his early childhood by Walter Sisulu and Steve Biko. And in his early childhood, that influence helped him mobilize people because he wanted change. That's basically the motivation for everything that he wanted to do. He wanted change. And having those influences helped him with mainly what I found from the interview was that helped him with discipline, because Steve Biko had many challenges during his time of leadership, as many people were very militant and impulsive, and he couldn't find, there was times where people wouldn't listen, but Steve Biko found a trust. He sort of built a trust, and that trust could help him speak to people and sort of influence them and tell them, listen, this is the situation right now, this is what we need to do, but there's a certain way we need to do it, and there's a political way that we need to do it, and that involves discipline. So having that influence helped Trevor Manuel within his leadership. What else I found was Trevor Manuel believes in all, I think, teamwork, and that's what you need in a good government. So we've all heard the saying that there's no I in team, and that is literally the basis of what a government is. You have to work together, you have to work as a people, so that the people that you are working for can see that you are united. And he spoke about how when, this is towards the end of his involvement in the parliament, but in 2008 when the stock crashed, he was begged to stay because the rand was falling really badly. And it's really interesting to see how the rand can fall because of one person, how you can lose someone within a team and then everything falls behind or really crashes, which is not that great, as you need an institution to back you as a leader, and you need people behind you when you're working as a team, and you need to work together. So yeah.
Definitely, I 100% agree. I think teamwork is crucial in terms of leadership, and it's one of our strongest points as the youth that I think we really have to tackle going forward. Georgina, would you mind sharing your take on what you think was the motivation for mobilizing the youth during that time?
Of course. So I'll be speaking about Theresa. So while Theresa was growing up, she was a member in her church's choir. Actually, she was very involved in her church's choir. And she credits this to where the political awareness formed in her. And she started her formal leadership in the late 1970s, early 1980s. And I say formal here because from watching this interview, I think Theresa has always been a leader, whether it be in her social, personal, or professional life. It just seems that she's been born to be a leader. And I think during this time, this was a changing point in resistance in South Africa, because most resistance movements realized that they needed to adapt their methods of resistance more so to become unified together rather than independent, smaller resistance groups. And then I think what motivated Theresa to take part in the mobilization of the masses and what caused her to stay motivated is her awareness of her voice and the power that her voice held in creating awareness and change for the everyday South African. I think more specifically, she wanted to ensure that the youth of South Africa would have a better quality of life, standard of life, and equal rights. Thank you.
Incredible. Yeah, I think what really stood out to me about what she said was this concept of being born a leader and also being aware of your voice. I think when we look at leadership, it's so interesting to see if being born a leader is a real thing, or if some people just learn to be a leader and learn to recognize the power within their voice. So some very interesting thought points. I'd like to hand over to Nicholas now to share his input.
Thank you, Noel. So if we're going to talk about Trevor Manuel and his role in the UDF and then the UDF as in a wider scope, we need to look at 1976, which was the year of the Soweto uprisings, which is a seminal moment and event in the apartheid era because it was a naked show of force by the apartheid government against children, students, school children who just wanted the simple right of being taught in their own language. And the brutal crackdown on those protesters, those children, was broadcasted for the first time worldwide. And it allowed and it gave the impetus to many internal and external resistance movements against apartheid to take it to the next level. So one of Trevor Manuel's first moments of political consciousness was when his Black South African neighbors in Kensington were forced to move to what is now Gugulethu Township. And he realized some of the more evil aspects of the apartheid regime at the time. Later on, he would go on to join the UDF in the 80s, which was a particularly repressive and oppressive time during apartheid due to the Botha administration stepping up repression of Black South Africans and trying to pass pseudo fake reforms to placate international supporters of the apartheid regime and Africans, such as the tricameral parliament, which was an attempt to bring in other South Africans, specifically colored South Africans and Indian South Africans, into the political system, but still maintaining that Black South Africans are not part of South Africa's political system. The UDF organized boycotts against the elections for this tricameral parliament and rolling mass protests across the country, and prevented the creation of anything close to what the apartheid regime wanted, and ensured that their propaganda was checked at every single step of the process. So the 80s were an incredibly volatile time for these reasons, including the apartheid government on its last legs trying to hold on to power as it was slipping away, as international support slowly was disappearing due to the winding down of the border war, and internal resistance increasing due to more repressive politics from the government. So Trevor Manuel talks specifically about this transition of internal militant resistance to a more evolutionary and more political resistance. which we will touch on later. Thank you, Nell.
Thank you, Nicholas. Yeah, resistance and defiance are definitely interesting talk points as well for this discussion. Deborah, would you like to now give your take on the situation?
Thank you, Manuel. I also watched Theresa's interview, so I would just like to add on what Gina said. She was very young, indeed she was very young when she was introduced to different people. It started at church. She was part of the youth, and that's when she wasn't forced, but she was introduced to different types of young people. And that's when her awareness of her being began. And later on, I think it was the middle of the 1970s, she moved to Athlone. And that's when she got attacked by the security police for the first time. And that's when her determination just escalated from there. She believed that the struggle for liberation wasn't a sacrifice. She believed that it was a choice. It's a choice. And I believe that what motivated that choice for her was the future of South Africa, which is the youth of South Africa. And she also believed that we have to be set free. Oppression will not be forever. And that just motivated her to keep on going and to partake in the mobilization of the masses. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, what was so remarkable, I found as well with Theresa's interview, was just her confidence in the fact that Black South Africans would be free in the future. And I remember her just constantly retelling her daughter that one day we will be free. I think that's something that we can all take such, that just confidence and inspirational determination. Lydian?
I would like to add on to what Lusanda and Nicholas said, as I also watched the Trevor Manuel interview, and just echo what they said. And what I found about Trevor upon watching his interview is that his undeniable trust in the people and in the institution, in the product that the institution can create, as well as the trust in the movement. I think that's very it was very loud within his interview how much he kept on saying, like he kept on like reiterating or insinuating that there was like this trust within the team that this was the right thing that we were doing. And even though he did speak about how he did not know exactly how to like completely fulfill a part in parliament or a part in parliament and a part in governance, he trusted the people that put him there, and he trusted his team that surrounded him. And I think that's what I learned very much in his interview.
Definitely. Considering what all of you have contributed to the discussion so far, as the youth during this COVID-19 period, what kind of leadership do you guys think we need to see now between us and kind of in our inner circles, our circles of influence? What would you say is the type of leadership we need to see between the youth? Let's start with Nicholas.
Thank you, Noel. To go from Trevor Manuel's interview, he talks about how he takes a quote from Ahmed Kathrada in reference to how much danger the apartheid activists who were operating internally were. And he speaks about all the different things that they had to take on to ensure the movement still continued with its momentum. And to take away from what he was saying, he speaks specifically about taking the slice of cake or taking the size of the cake that you've been given and dealing with what you have been given. You can't turn away from problems simply because you're not comfortable with them or because you're not familiar with them. If you are put in a position where you need to solve or find a way to solve problems, then you need to find the best way you can. And personally, I believe the best way to go about that is learning from other people, is finding people who know better than you and being able to say to yourself, no, I can't, actually, I don't have the qualifications to do much about this, but I know people who can. And I think one thing for leadership that we need and that many people across the world, not just South Africa, need, is this idea of, I want to call it networking for lack of a better term, but it's this idea that you must be able to find people, or find people that know people that can solve the problem, bring people who are experts in, or bring people that have skills to solve these problems. To quote from Trevor Manuel, if you only want to take decisions in fair weather, you'll never make it as a leader. It's these hard times that really forge and really create what kind of leadership style or what kind of method you have. Thank you.
Thank you. I know Lydian would like to add to that point. So Lydian, take it away.
Yeah, thank you, Now. I would also like to add to what Nicholas said about the networking of kinds of just being able to learn from people and being open to learn from people. And I think what also what Trevor Manuel said in his interview, well, what I understood from his interview is that it's okay not to know how to solve the problem, but you need to know who to contact in order to solve that problem. And I think there's a lack of confidence in people doing that, because they see that as asking for help as a point of not knowing what to do, and seeing that you're not as the strong intellectual person that was put into this position. But I think what was very much said in Trevor Manuel's interview and also in Theresa Solomon's interview is that it's okay not to know personally how to solve it, but you need to go out and try and find ways and find people who know how to help you solve it. Yeah.
Definitely. I think humility is always important when tackling issues of leadership, and just being able to humble yourself and knowing that you might not be the front runner in every situation. Lusanda, would you like to add?
Yes, thank you. I found a particular line that really stuck out to me and goes and echoes exactly what my colleagues have said. Trevor Manuel said him and his comrades were learning in the process of maturing. And that's so important as a leader and as an institution, because you're always learning something new. And you also use the term political orphan, because they didn't really have the leaders to show them the way or lead by example. So they had to learn everything by themselves. And we're sort of also doing that right now in COVID. No one really knows what to do. No one knows what to say. No one knows how to help. But taking it day by day and listening to each other is the best way that we can deal with this pandemic. Because if you think individually, or if you don't speak to other people, how else are you going to learn? How else are you going to change something? How else are you going to know what's actually wrong? And yeah, there's also a really important way of dealing with leadership in a pandemic. Just as my colleague said, you have to find someone who knows better, and that person may know way more than you, and they're not in that position that you're in right now, but that's okay. Because an institution, a good, sound institution, needs the same skill. They need, or even better, you need to elevate. You need to have a voice. You need to listen to people. You need to have fresh voices, and you need to bring new people through. And I find that really important. And that's the kind of leadership we need right now.
Thank you. Very inspiring, Lusanda. Deborah Kerr.
Thank you. I really think that a pandemic is so chaotic and challenging, and it's very unpredictable and uncertain. And in a time such as this, you need a leader who will reassure you that they will do everything in their power to find, maybe not find a solution, but make things as comfortable, make things not so juggly or so scary. And I also find that a lot of times as the youth of South Africa, we don't have that example of a leader that's supposed to make you stagnant or make you be able to believe that I can stand on my 2 feet, that this leader will carry me through in this pandemic. And I found that because Theresa says that you should expose your awareness, you should expose your voice, you shouldn't hide it. And to me, that was just, wow, you need to also be aware of the leaders that are currently leading the country and the leaders that are showing you this is what you're doing, because we are in a time, like Lusanda said, where we are learning, we are growing, we're being folded, we're being molded. And I think when you look at another leader, you're supposed to also be aware of what they're not doing and what you can do better. And I really believe one thing that I believe that the youth can take and they can elevate it and they can grow on that is a very good foundation of communication. Lusanda said that Steve Biko speaks on trust. And the only way to enable that is by speaking. And I really believe that if you communicate, you can build that trust relationship through a leader and the people that they're leading. And also being very open and honest about when you're communicating, because your words are supposed to have substance. When you promise something, you're supposed to deliver. And how can you build that relationship with the people that you are leading if your words don't have any substance? And I would also like to add on another factor and attribute that I really believe that we need as the youth in the leadership, is that we need activity in the internal communities in South Africa. We need leaders that go into the communities and speak to the people, and then the people speak to them, and then that identify the issues that we are currently facing. And in that way, we can have stepwise strategies that is very beneficial to the people, because as a leader, you serve. You're not there to be served, then you're not a leader. It's not about power and it's not about authority. It's about leading the people and finding ways that is beneficial to them, and then finding a solution. Theresa was part of the Civic Kayak Association of Woodlands, and the same issues that they fought for, we are struggling with today. And that just tells me that what are our leaders doing? And I think if we as the youth identify that we need to be active in the community and we need to speak out about these things, because nothing will happen if you just keep quiet. Nothing will happen, nothing will change. I think if you start in the internal communities, if you start small, bigger change can come. So that is my take on leadership. Thank you.
So true. Leadership and servantship go hand in hand. I couldn't agree more. Georgina and Lusanda, would you like to add some final thoughts to the discussion at hand? Thanks.
So firstly, I just want to touch on the question. So I think being a leader in COVID is very tricky, as my colleagues have said before. There's not really been examples of leadership in a pandemic. In South Africa, today marks our 471st day in lockdown, which is a ridiculously long time. And I think people are starting to lose motivation in sticking to regulations strictly and following rules because they're tired. And I think what people want is empathy in a leader to tell them, this is difficult. What you are doing is difficult. 471 days of constantly telling yourself, sanitize your hands, wash your hands, social distance, don't see your friends, is very difficult. And I think we need a leader to tell us, I am struggling too. I am also struggling with this. It's not just a, look how easy this is. I think that's a very important thing for people to hear, that a leader who understands the problems of the everyday person in South Africa. Also, I want to touch on a point that Lusanda said earlier about actually Lusanda, Lydian, and Nicholas, they all actually were speaking, briefly touched about this, about asking people who know better. And I think in COVID, that's been very interesting because we've kind of fallen into the trap of following first world countries, for example, like England and America in what they're doing. And if we look at that, we are not England and America. We have a very different population number, different factors, different diseases, different people. We are not them. We don't have the same resources. And I feel like largely what's been happening is that African countries have been following by example, but it's not necessarily working for us. And I feel like Africa actually has a lot of experience in diseases. If you look at like HIV, TB, you know, no countries were like, oh my goodness, let's look at, you know, Africa, look what they're doing. Wow, let's take some points from that. Everyone kind of just went, this is how we're doing things. And we kind of had to follow along. So I think some independence and trust could also be beneficial in a leader. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Lusanda, would you like to just close off with your input?
I completely agree with everything Gina has just said. We need to stand our ground. We need to decolonize as soon as possible. Not tomorrow, not the next day, now. And I know we trying to see the bigger picture. We're trying to, you know, what's the safest option? I understand that, but when you can see something is not working, just as Gina said, it needs to change, it needs to go, it needs to transform. Then I just wanted to correct myself, being transparent and honest. I said Steve Biko earlier. It's most definitely Chris Hani. Chris Hani is the name. Thank you.
No worries, Lusanda. Thank you guys so much for your input. I'd just like to take this opportunity to invite the audience to ask questions in the chat box below, and we will make sure to address those towards the end of the discussion, as well as please take a look at our social media pages. It is Servant Leader on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. So again, just feel free to drop a comment and your input in the discussion below, and definitely take a look at our social media pages. Thank you. So let's move on to our fourth question, considering this very interesting discussion just surrounding empathy and what it really means to be a leader during COVID now. And if you had to put yourself in that situation and make a contribution or mobilize people during this time, what lessons would you take from Trevor and Theresa's discussions? Let's start with Lydian.
Thank you, Nell. So what I think is what I found through all of the interviews on the Servant Leader website, not only from Trevor, Manuel, and Theresa Solomon's interviews, is that the ability to multitask, and with that also the want to know more, and keeping that with it, like keeping the knowledge that you have learned, and then using that in various situations, and not only staying to only. So if I were to study in, as now, theatre and performance, I'm not only staying in theatre and performance because I've learned so much in my years at university that I can now talk into politics, I can talk into economics, I can talk into linguistics in South Africa. And I think that's very important. The ability to multitask and the ability to learn more and to use what you learn in every aspect of your life. I think that's very important.
Thank you so much. Deborah Kerr.
Sorry. I said it before that Theresa says that we need to expose our consciousness. I truly believe that nothing will ever happen or change will never come if you don't tell someone that there's a problem. And not just our own awareness, not just our own voices. We know what's currently going on in our country, and we know what our leaders are doing, and we are conscious about the issues that we are facing, and we are very much aware of it. And I truly believe that the only way we can get people to speak about it and for people to understand our reasons behind the need for change and for something to actually happen, instead of this stagnant situation that South Africa is currently in the pandemic. Like Gina mentioned before, it's 400 and what days we've been in a lockdown. The only way people will understand and people will start speaking up is if we expose what we already are aware of. It always starts with ourselves. I truly believe that. And we should just start using our voices. Sometimes we believe that we are young people and we can't speak about it, but we are the leaders of tomorrow. If we don't start speaking up now, we probably never will. So that is something that Theresa, that's a lesson that I take from Theresa.
Definitely, I think exposure and just utilizing our own inner circles and our own social media platforms to really just project our thoughts and encourage the discussion outside of spaces such as. Nicholas, would you like to further add on Deborah's point?
Thank you, Noel. To add on the whole topic of lessons in political mobilization, I think from Trevor Manuel, the best thing to take away is leading by example. He talks about becoming finance minister during the early days of South Africa's democracy post-94. And he talks about specifically how he has to navigate a space that is occupied almost entirely by white male bodies. And I think my personal takeaway as someone who benefits from white privilege is, and as I said before, in terms of finding people who know better than you, is to elevate people of color who know better than me about certain issues that quite frankly do not affect me, but I am entirely and completely empathetic towards and understand the considerations, and or at least try my utmost best to understand. And that means putting myself in a place to help other people to get to where they need to go, especially like if I look at it in a microcosm of the industry that I want, and many of us are heading towards theatre in South Africa. It's elevating stories that are of people of color, because in the wider media in the world, we don't get to see that. It's only recently that it's become quote unquote mainstream. The other thing that I wanted to touch on is this idea of leaders and people who are in leadership positions becoming comfortable with what people higher in leadership positions have decided. Trevor Manuel talks about a specific point in the ANC's transformation from an underground militant organization committed to any means of ending apartheid to a political party which would take part in the 94 elections. And he talks about how the ANC NEC at the time, made up of Ahmed Kathrada and Thabo Mbeki and Nelson Mandela, decided that this was to go ahead, and how the armed wing of the party, Mkhonto weSizwe, was not particularly satisfied because they've been preparing for years for an armed struggle. So they turned to Chris Hani, who had built so much trust with the MK over years, and he was able to, although he didn't fully agree with what the leaders at the top said, he understood the need for putting down their weapons in favor of a political solution. And it was that humility to be able to go along with something that he did not agree with entirely at first, but it was part of the spirit of the organization that he was a part of. And I think there's something to be learned there, that although certain solutions you may not agree with at first, I think some of us come to understand the merit of those. And to just go back to what I was saying before, it's that whole idea of leading by example. If you want to effect change, you need to be able to make that change for yourself. It's all good and dandy that I say that I need to be able to put myself aside and elevate other voices, but if I'm not actively doing that, then my words are empty.
That is so true. I think that speaks to what Georgina was touching on as well. A leader who's able to own up to the fact that they could be struggling in a situation where they are called to lead as well, but at the same time, asking by example. Leading by example. I'd like to hand over to Lusanda to just also give an input on what you've learned from the discussions between Theresa and Trevor.
Thanks, Neil. I have learned, as we've all said, the ability to show your humanity from Trevor Manuel. And in isiZulu, there's a saying that says, umuntu ngumuntu ngabantu. And that is basically a person is a person through other people or because of other people. And that in South Africa is known as ubuntu. You need to have humility. That's the only way you can have a good community. That's the only way you can work with others. And that's the only way you can help, or essentially. And one way Trevor Manuel helped within the government is identifying the micro issues. And that's a lesson I'm really going to take from him. You can't just look at the bigger picture and deal with the biggest problems in a country, because that's not going to solve everything. There are small little things that all add up that you need to deal with as well. Not to say that the macro issues aren't important, but the micro are just as important, because that can make or break your country.
Definitely. Lydian, could you please close off for us?
Yeah, so just echoing what everybody said, yeah, most definitely. And I also just like to add that I think what's very important to note is that as much as we are the leaders of tomorrow, I'd like to change that and say that we actually are the leaders of today. Because if we're speaking about Trevor Manuel, Theresa Solomon, Sophia de Bruyn, Nelson Mandela, Thabo Mbeki, all of these people, they didn't start when thinking, oh, we're the leaders of tomorrow, being in our 40s, being in our 30s, being in our 50s, working in government. They started as teenagers, as 20-year-olds, working in politics, working with the people, finding out more and fighting for the rights of the country, of the rights of the people. And I think that's what really we need to invest in as the youth of today, is to not think of we're the leaders of tomorrow. We're the leaders of today, because tomorrow is not always granted. I think it's very important to take in.
Definitely. I think what's so important to remember is just to be present in our activism and not always use it as an excuse to kind of delay reasons for speaking up and delay conversations, because we are the leaders of, the present time. Our fifth question is that, touching on the fact that we are celebrating the month of Mandela's birthday, what do you think your contribution could be to the 60 minutes in celebration of Mandela Day? Do you think it is enough time, or do you think as the youth we should be striving to do more than just 60 minutes in a day? Let's start with Georgina.
Thank you, Noel. So for me, I really enjoy July because it's a month where I personally notice a lot of big businesses, corporations actively make change and contribute to their communities and really advertise that they are doing this, which I think is positive. I think it's a good thing that businesses do this. But I suppose it's not so great that they don't always advertise this for the rest of the year. I think as individuals, it's important to always give back to your community. But give back sounds a little bit weird. I know people say give back all the time, but I don't know, for me, it feels very uncomfortable. Like, I don't feel like it's giving back. I feel like it's supporting your community. It's helping your community grow. It's helping make change. I feel like give back. Sorry, I know I feel like give back is kind of like a kind of savior type of word, which I don't think helping your community is. I think it's just the decent thing to do. So for me personally, what I think I want to do for my 60 minutes is I want to go and volunteer at a place called Miracle Mission. They're based in Johannesburg, and they are a children's home for abandoned babies. And they are really great. You guys should check them out if you can at miracle.mission on Instagram. And I think it's important also to remember that 60 minutes is a starting point. It's not 60 minutes one and done for the year. It's more so of respecting Nelson Mandela and his wishes and giving, you know, but I think that's, we can do more. Like, I feel like as individuals, we always forget that we are so capable of doing more, of helping, of creating change in whatever way we can. I mean, all of us here are students in a creative degree. I mean, it's so possible that we could, I don't know, go to a school for little kids and teach them, I don't know, how to do a drama warm-up, or like a, you know, when you roll down for 8, roll up, you know, that's such a basic part of our world, but it's so important. So I think it's important to always be a part of your community, to always listen to your community, and as Theresa reiterates, to communicate with your community. Okay, thank you.
Definitely. Thank you for those lovely points. I'd just like to, again, encourage any audience members to possibly share what they are doing for their 60 minutes for Mandela Day, and any of their thoughts on some of our panelists' contribution. I'd like now to give the floor to Lusanda to share her contribution.
All right, so for my 60 minutes this year, I'm going to be tackling things that I've been holding back at home, so hard and difficult conversations that I've needed to have for many, many years, because in our families, our parents, our grandparents, aunts, uncles, they've been conditioned to think in a certain way sometimes, and it's very, very difficult to live when you have indifference in the home. So I'm going to have that meeting with family members and just do my best to hear from them and let them hear my voice as well. And I'm preparing now. I've started already because 60 minutes is definitely not enough. So I've started having, you know, dinner conversations, TV conversations. I'll be like, what do you think of this? What do you think of that? Just as a warm up. And I think that's really important. And I encourage all citizens, youth, adults, elderly to do the same.
Definitely. I know it can be so hard sometimes to start these conversations in your own home, but when we talk about like being active in our inner circles, I think we forget that we can literally start with our own family members and in our group chats with our friends, just bringing up uncomfortable topics that really need to be, you know, talked about and normalized more. So I think that's a really interesting point. And you don't have to always think of the most extravagant outreach that you can do. I think you can really make change in your own home. Nicholas, would you like to add?
Thank you, Noel. So in my capacity as treasurer of Rainbow UCT, the queer organization currently at UCT, we will be donating 10,000 Rand to the Triangle Project and to the Pride Shelter Trust in our capacity as the organization. So, but to touch on that and to touch on what Deborah and what you, Noel, just said is that our participation and our contribution as South Africans for these 67 minutes and many minutes more that we should be doing doesn't only have to be financial. With respect to the current situation in terms of economics in South Africa and the pandemic, many South Africans don't have the luxury of giving financial contributions as much as they want to. So we can impart other things, such as skills development. And like what Georgina's saying, another aspect all of us here consider so basic as simple breath work, and being able to move our breath in our body and being able to really feel that. And just like the calming and overall beneficial parts of that, and imparting that on another person can be a part of our service as South Africans. It's simple things like that that we can do. The other thing that I'll be doing this year for the 67 minutes that I've been doing for most of my life now is the Santa Shoebox project, which is, so I'm not doing it in person as I used to because of the pandemic. Instead, if you go to the Santa Shoebox website, santashoebox.org, you can make a small financial contribution to the organization, which they'll put a shoebox together for you. And it's all these little things that you can find. Like everybody has been saying, it doesn't have to be big financial contributions. It doesn't have to be an entire shoebox. It can, little things such as talking to people and educating them on certain issues, educating our parents, educating older family members about how everything is today, and just imparting skills. And I think that's particularly important because, as Georgina touched on, a lot of these companies will put on this big performative parade about how great they are and how they have been transforming since the end of apartheid and but at the end of the day, when you realize that white South Africans still occupy most of the top positions in companies currently registered at the JSE, you ask yourself, but where does that transformation, what is happening with it? Transformation doesn't end. So imparting skills or imparting small little changes everywhere, every day of your life is part of what I believe it means to be South African, until we can say that we have transformed as a nation. Thank you.
Right, thank you so much. I completely agree. I think these micro changes hold a lot more longevity in the future. You know, the big kind of parades of outreach are wonderful to see, but when we implement like skill implementation and encourage conversations like that, I feel like they have a lot more longevity and a lot more transformation that we see. Deborah Kerr, we would love to hear your input.
Thank you. I would actually like to touch on Gina and Nicholas and Lusanda. I know in my community, in my hometown, it's a privilege to be educated. I know for a fact that both my parents didn't go to university. My dad went to college, and only after a few years after me and my sister were born, they went to do courses at universities. And I just think that, like Nelson Mandela says, I totally agree with, education is the strongest, it's the most powerful weapon. And I know for a fact, like Nicholas says, we sometimes take for granted that we are educated. Sometimes I just think, oh my gosh, I'm a university student. Okay, that's it. But to someone else, it's a privilege. And I think if we start becoming aware that it's a privilege, because how many South Africans, how many young people, how many children don't even go to school? How many old people have died and they've never been educated? And I truly believe that education, my father always says, education, no one can take education away from you. And every year, me and my mother, we pay for, it's one of the colored schools in our community. They are not that privileged. A lot of the children, they'll go to school and they don't even have a sandwich, or sometimes they don't even have school uniform. So we pay for their school fees, and we donate them, but we stay anonymous, because I agree with what Gina said. It's not about giving back, it's about supporting, because I'm not supposed to give back when I am helping someone stay warm at night with a warm blanket. That's basic human rights. You have the right to eat something, you have the right to education. And so this year we will continue to, for our 60 minutes, we will go and give stationery, and like Lusanda, start with ourselves, by the clothes that we don't wear, because we do that a lot. We say, oh my gosh, I don't have any clothes in my closet. Meanwhile, they don't even have a sweater to wear to school. So I'll be giving the clothes in my closet that I do not ever wear. And I will be donating those to the families of those children. And I just want to add that 60 minutes is not enough. It's definitely not enough. I think if we start thinking about it or perceive it as a lifestyle, and if every South African who has that awareness that, you know, I can actually help someone today, and it starts with the small things, like one of my colleagues here mentioned, then South Africa can change. So definitely education is something that I believe that I will be contributing to for Mandela Day.
Thank you so much. Lydian.
For me, I haven't planned anything as of yet on what to do on Mandela Day, but in the Plaatjes family, it's never been a kind of a thing to do Mandela Day as a big thing. It's been said and we acknowledge it, but every day in our household, we try to make every day a day that we give back. Well, not give back, but we always try and help our community around us. And that's something I most definitely learned from both of my parents, from my aunts and uncles on both sides of my family, from my sisters. You know, my mom and my dad didn't have the privileged life that I live now. And that's something that is deeply entrenched within myself, my sisters, and all of my cousins, that we continuously help people who are less privileged to us, because we know what needs to be done so that we can all live such a privileged life that we have lived and we have been given. So what I am trying to think of doing is trying to try and support or try and give food or some old blankets and stuff like that to the homeless people that I see walking around Cape Town, because I think winter especially is the most horrendous time of the year, especially for homeless people. I think about being like just waking up in the morning and thinking how cold I am, and then realizing I have a blanket, I have a pillow, I have a heater with me. I can make myself something warm to drink and I can warm myself up. But someone who's homeless, they can't do any of that and they must be freezing, you know? And in the Western Cape, homelessness is a really huge conversation. So I think I'll try and find something to do along that lines on Mandela Day. Because of COVID, like we can actually try and do something outside. But like I said, in the Plaatjes family, every day is Mandela Day. So it's like, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lydia. And I definitely just would like to amplify that statement. I think you and your family just encourage such a sense of citizenship that it's beautiful to see and so encouraging for all of us. That concludes our panel discussion for today. I would still like to encourage any questions in the chat if any audience members would like to contribute. Otherwise, I would just like to give a huge thank you to all of our panelists today. It's been lovely engaging with all of you, some of my fellow classmates, and it's just been lovely having such a discussion, even during our holiday period. I think it's important to encourage peers outside of this space to keep talking, to keep displaying what it means to be an active leader and to keep mobilizing the youth. And I would like to give special thanks as well to Active Citizenship and Servant Leader. And also I'd like to encourage the audience members to watch possibly the interviews conducted with Theresa Solomon and Trevor Manuel. That's a very good proposal, possibly on Mandela Day or during this month. So if there are no further questions, I would just like to conclude and give a huge thanks to our audience members for watching. And I hope you enjoyed today's panel discussion. I have been your host, Neo Gumete, and I hope that you'll join us again in future for more pivotal discussions in mobilizing and transforming our youth and our future. Thank you so much. Thank you. Any closing statements from the panelists? I think just a shared appreciation. All right. Thank you so much.